Hello and welcome to another episode of the Uncommon Energy podcast. We've got a bunch to talk about in this week's episode. Our main topics this week, though, are going to be the Brisbane Regionals late announcement from Pokemon tournaments coming up in just a few short weeks, but was just announced recently. We've got results from the Warsaw Regional Championships, which took place this past weekend. Plenty to talk about there as we put a bookmark or a bookend, I guess, on the Lost Origin format. We will, of course, have Guess That Flavor Text, everyone's favorite segment of the show. And then we'll give our first impressions of Silver Tempest. Now that it has officially been released, we've both had a chance to play with the cards a little bit. We'll give our thoughts, think about what is going to be good, what's not, what's overhyped, what's relevantly hyped, I guess. And we'll break all that down this week and more. My name is Chip Ritchie, joined here as always by my co-host, Azul GG. What's up, Azul? How we doing, man?
Doing pretty good. I guess one thing we could have actually put on our list of topics to talk about as well, but I guess I'll just mention it right now is that registration happened for San Diego Regionals this week, and it went smoothly. It went well, and I don't think they didn't hit the cap in 10 seconds or something. So I thought I would at least mention that. So I registered for that. Looking forward to the coming up events. The new format's been okay. Lugia is obviously good, but I feel like it's kind of lacking. But the new set's kind of lacking besides that. Yeah, been a pretty good week so far. Doing a lot of streaming and stuff like that, so it's been good. How about you, Chip? How was the week?
It's been a good week. We actually took first little family trip with baby Samuel. Went to my parents' beach house for a few days this past week. And then we also went to the North Carolina Zoo this past weekend. So we've just had all kinds of crazy stuff going on. Stuff that the baby is not going to remember at all, but was good practice for us as parents, to get used to how do you do things in public as a parent now with a family with a child. So yeah, it was a good time though. Got to get out and do some fun things, and also looking forward this week to the new Pokemon video games, Scarlet and Violet, coming out. I'm going to be picking up Pokemon Scarlet personally and playing through it. Definitely looking forward to that. Azul, don't think is probably going to be be on the Scarlet and Violet train, but
No,
I know it took you like a year to play through Sword, I feel like,
it
right? Or
took a little
something like
while.
that.
Yeah, I talked about it on my stream this week. They're not Pokemon video games are, they're definitely made for kids. They're if you're, really invested in Pokemon and stuff like that, they're good, I'm sure, but overall they are not great video games. At their core. Hopefully no one gets too offended
Well,
from
I don't
that,
know
but
about that. I mean, it's just, I mean, if you don't like that, JRPG style, right? Of like the, collect your team and then
sure, sure.
turn-based fighting and stuff like that,
Not great video games for me, that's what I should say, right?
Sure, sure. Yeah, it's, I
I'm
mean,
not I'm not was not a huge fan. Yeah, I played through Sword and Shield, which is my first Pokemon video game ever that I fully played through. I actually did enjoy our Legends of Arceus though, but that was like so much different from
it
the
is a
whole
very
open
different
world
game. Yeah.
thing was like the enjoyable part of that. The other ones where you're kind of more,
I do
thrust
think,
down a
for what it's worth, I don't think this is a spoiler. I don't know many spoilers, but I do think that this game is supposed to. From the trailers and stuff, it at least looks like it's going to be more in line with Legends Arceus a little bit, where it's a more open area that you can
yeah.
explore and just catch all kinds of different Pokemon right off the bat. So I definitely enjoyed Legends Arceus as well. So my hope is that they take some of that formula and then apply it to like a main series game and not just keep it into a spin-off type series with the Legends titles. But we'll see. I'm looking
Hopefully.
forward to trying it out this week. Also, you mentioning San Diego made me think about this, and then also talking about the video game here. It was kind of funny on my Twitter timeline to see like I get a little spillover of VGC Twitter. Like I follow a bunch of the casters and then a few other players and stuff like that. So I see some of it on my Twitter of their reactions to San Diego regionals, because this is the first VGC
Yeah.
regionals, and they were all reacting to the fact that they have to pay $70 to play at regionals. They were like, "This costs more than the video game that we are are buying to play in the tournament." But
They had like a delayed reaction compared to everyone
yeah,
else.
yeah. It's like, oh,
A couple months
we
late on
went through
that.
this a couple months ago, guys. Yeah,
Yeah,
get with the program.
for some reason I thought the video game wasn't coming out until next year, but that wouldn't really make sense if San Diego Regionals was the the first regional with the video game because that's literally the second weekend of the beginning of the
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, so the game
And
comes
there is
out.
already
Mhm.
there's already like 600 people registered, I think, for the VGC, which is, I mean, usually their first regional with the new game is usually their biggest, but it's good to see. I wonder how long that's gonna last though before they get down to the the hundreds or the 100 200 range, which I think is what they're usually at. Hopefully it keeps up. I'm just always so baffled and surprised by how many people play the video game, but there's so few people who play it competitively in comparison. Especially when you look at the TCG, the amount of people who play the TCG are the exact same amount of people who show up to the tournaments and play in it. Obviously, there is some more people who play more casually, local events, maybe go to one
Yeah.
regional or no regionals a year. But you got everyone knows what I'm saying. There's so many people play the video game, but just
Um,
don't. Very few play competitively.
a much higher percentage of the Pokemon TCG player base participates in competitive play
Yeah,
than of the Pokemon VGC player base. And I think that's partially because like so much of the Pokemon video game player base is like people who like to play the singles mode. Like there's like the
yeah.
whole Smogon Pokemon Showdown stuff that I know is massive, but regardless,
I
it's
feel like it
not.
would enough of that would like feed into like the competitive side of things, but like it's like it's still such a small percentage feeds into the competitive.
Yeah, it is definitely small. I mean, maybe if the prizes were bigger, it would that would
It
definitely get a lot of people's attention on it. I feel like, right? You
would incentivize some people,
put
yeah.
some money on top, a lot more people will show up. But regardless, this is not a Pokemon video game podcast. It is a Pokemon TCG podcast. And we're going to start off this week by talking about a couple of announcements from Pokemon. The first one being a little bit of a late slash surprise announcement for our friends down under in Australia. There's a regional championships in just a few weekends in Brisbane. It is going to be December 3rd through the 4th. And this was announced on November the 12th or 13th, I think. So, not too much heads up from the Pokemon Company for our Australian friends. And I definitely saw plenty of them not too happy about this over on Twitter over the weekend. 3 weeks, not really enough time to plan a pretty long distance trip.
Yeah, and I think oh man, hang on, I'm already like something. Yeah, I think they knew about it a little bit ahead of time. Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah,
Oh, no,
not very
yes.
long.
What you're thinking of is I did see Natalie Miller's post earlier on in the week. She had found on ESL's website, ESL Australia is who runs the Pokemon tournaments down in Australia, I believe.
Mhm.
And on their website, there was a like a phantom post of this regionals existing. And then
Yeah.
she tweeted about it. It got taken down. And then a few days later, the official announcement
Oh,
came out.
did it get taken down? I didn't even know that happened. I didn't know it got taken
Yeah,
down.
yeah, it got taken off the ESL website apparently.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of unfortunate. I mean, we're fortunate enough to know I mean, there was a couple of the regionals we didn't know about, like was it Fresno was the one that got recently announced, I guess, but that's not until I don't even know when Fresno is happening.
Fresno is not
Um
even on the Pokemon website. The reason people think or know
oh,
about like a Fresno being on the board potentially is because of one of the organizers' T-shirts. I remember seeing
yeah,
that
yeah,
the
yeah.
Team Northwest T-shirts listed all of their regionals, and one of them was Fresno at the end of the year sometime, I think. And everyone was
I didn't
like,
even
"Wait,
realize that though.
there's a Fresno regionals," and it's I mean, according to the T-shirt, there is, but there's nothing on the Pokemon
Yeah.
website about it.
Well, I assume that means it probably is going to happen then, because I feel like they would confirm that it's not happening if it wasn't going to happen. So I feel like that means it is happening.
Let's see
They
if I
just
can find the
haven't
shirt.
announced it, I guess. Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, I just assumed that it would have. I saw the shirt. That's the initial thing I saw was the shirt, and now I'm looking at the official Pokemon page with all the regionals listed, and it's not there. So yeah, maybe it won't happen. I assume it would, especially if they haven't confirmed it isn't after the shirt was seen. It's like, oh, we had these shirts made before we knew we weren't going to be able to do the regional, so don't expect it. Would be something that'd be reasonable to say. I feel like so. I assume it's still probably happening. But yeah, what I was going to say is like, I mean, not everywhere else in the world is as fortunate as North America. To be honest, all of our regionals were announced quite a while ago. Probably not as soon as they should have been, at least for the first couple. And then we have had all that information for a while, but yeah, not as nice over in Australia. All of the regionals are announced now. It looks like there's three of them listed: Brisbane, Perth, and Sydney. I don't know if they usually have more than three regionals over there. That sounds about right to me. Maybe a special event or two will make its way onto their schedule. But at least they're announced now. But yeah, it does feel just like it was for us with Baltimore. It feels like it's a little bit late in being announced by the time the first one is coming around. And Latin America still has. Oh no, they did have another one announced. Oh no, that's the first one they haven't yet. They
No,
still don't
yeah.
have anything else announced past the first regional that they had. So yeah, who knows?
Yeah, and also something relevant as well. Jake Lazari responded to my tweet about the situation, saying that the main thing that most non Aussies don't realize is that these dates are the weekend for schoolies in Australia. Which, first off, schoolies, great name. We definitely should change the name of spring break in America to schoolies. But schoolies is the Aussie version of spring break for all of those who just finished high school, and it takes place just south of Brisbane, which causes an absolute mess in terms of flight and accommodation prices due to the huge spike for that one weekend of the year. So I'm kind of interested to see what numbers are going to look like for this event. Um, is there going to be a huge? I mean, you have to imagine there's going to be less people at this tournament than there would have been if it had been announced 3 months ago, for sure, right? So it's just going to be a matter of how big of a difference does it make, and it's probably going to be a pretty competitive regional as well, because I would imagine pretty much all of the top 10 plus players in Australia will probably be at this regional, and we're looking at something that could have around 200ish players, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Hopefully they get around 200-ish players. I forget their last regional. I think it was like 190, if I remember correctly. I'm trying
I
to
think it
look.
was like 290.
Um,
I think they did have close to 300 in the end of last season.
yeah, I mean, those kind of things. I feel like you can't. There's not too much you can put on those kind of things for the organizers of like they can't plan around everything that is happening, in the rest of the region or the area or the world at that time. Like if it just lines up with something else that's happening that weekend, it just kind of lines up, and just I think that's fine. So that's like not really. I think anything to ever hold the TOs against the TOs, to be honest, because you never know. I mean, are they going out of their way to like find every little thing that they can plan around? Maybe this is something that's a little bit bigger, a little bit easier to have planned around, but I don't know. That's like something I never really like to hold against TOs when there's like something else happening the same weekend. As long as they have a decent venue for the event happening, and it exists reasonably close to some way to get there, some kind of means of transportation, trains, or right next to the airport, whatever it might be. Just being able to get to the venue location from wherever those people are traveling in from. That's really the only thing that really I think needs to matter. But yeah, just kind of the lateness of the announcement. It does sound, from what I've seen on Twitter, it does sound like quite a few people are choosing not to go because of how late it was announced. But we'll see what the
Well,
numbers
I
end up
think
being
it's
like. That
like,
kind of might just be like the loud minority speaking out, I guess. I don't
I
know. We'll
mean,
see.
I don't know if I think some of it was people not saying they're choosing not to go, is some of the people saying, I'm not going to pay $2,000 for a flight to go because it's
Yeah.
announced so late. It's like, but I don't know. I mean, it's
Oh, that's
just
what I mean.
tough.
That's what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see what the numbers end up saying for sure. I mean, um, in the
And
end,
and
yeah.
to clarify, you were actually right. It was around 190 for the last
Yep.
regional, which was in Melbourne. The last Brisbane regional had 150 players. So, I mean, probably around that would be best case scenario. But on short notice, is there a chance that we see it even lower, closer to that 100 player mark, which we definitely could. Well, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it seems possible. It seems possible, and we'll see. We'll see what the end numbers end up being. But of course, I guess you always want it to be bigger, right? Because you want to show that the game is growing and
Yes.
getting bigger, and that's what we definitely saw from the regional numbers. I believe from Australia last year was
Hmm.
that they were bigger than they were the year before. So hopefully that continues. Although for this first one, it might not be happening because of the late notice. We'll see.
Something else kind of interesting in this whole realm of announcements from the Pokemon Company this week as well. The remaining international championship dates were announced over on the Pokemon website, mostly, and then taken away. But so OCIC will be in February on the 17th through the 19th, EUIC in April the 14th through the 16th. And then originally it was posted on the website that NAIC was taking place the 23rd through the 25th. Someone on Twitter, though, did point out that this is the same weekend as the Origins Game Fair, which, for those who don't know, is a absolutely massive game convention, like board gaming, tabletop gaming, card gaming convention that takes place in Columbus, Ohio, every single year at the Columbus Convention Center, which is where the Pokemon NAIC tournament happens. And there is no way that both of these things could take place at the same time. So someone pointed
Could
it
it
out on
not?
Twitter. Oh, no way, dude. Origins is massive. I think there's like no shot.
I'm trying to think about like how big the convention is. You might be right. There might not be room for both. I remember the
Especially
year
with
that
how
Origins.
massive of a haul Pokemon needs as well.
Yeah, I remember the year that Origins was the week before NAIC, and there was a special event.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it was pretty big. I think it's the only time I've been to Origins, so it was pretty big. Yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right. It would be hard to fit both. Yeah, I mean, yeah, NAIC also takes up quite a bit of space. So it is possible that it's impossible unless they run it alongside Origins. Like, what if they did that?
Well,
Is that
that's
a
interesting
possibility?
because the original Pokemon North American national championships, the American
Yeah,
national championships, before there was international championships, the original national championships did take place
yeah.
alongside the Origins Game Fair back in like 2005, 2006, that time frame.
It
So
was before my time.
there's definitely a history of, Pokemon events with the Origin Game Fair. Now, I don't know if that is the intention and what is going to happen, but what did happen is that the NAIC date was removed from the Pokemon International Championships website and now just
Yeah,
says June 2023 somewhere in the USA. So
it
maybe
doesn't even
this
say.
got pushed out a little early, or they're not quite cleared up on
Yeah.
exactly where it's happening. I don't know. A little
Because
bit
they
of a
took away the
mess.
location. They took away the location as well, which I guess maybe makes sense. If you're gonna take away the date, you should also take away the location. But we actually just didn't know. I think we're all assuming it's gonna be in Columbus again, right? I think it's kind of the assumption, but I
I
guess we
mean,
don't
it's
know
been
for
there the
sure.
last few NAICs. I mean, it's a fine
Yeah.
spot for it. It's a little weird. I always joke with people about like these international championships, how you get to go to Sao Paulo or London or, Melbourne, Sydney, any of these places that it's been in the past. And then for NAIC, it's come on down to Columbus, Ohio or Indianapolis, Indiana.
Or go over one state to Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, NAIC I think has always been either in Indianapolis or Columbus, but most of the time, I think only
Yeah.
was it only in Indianapolis once? Is that right? And then it's been in Columbus
No,
the rest of the times.
no, because it bounced back recently. It was in Indianapolis the
Have
year
we
before the
gone
last
back and
one.
forth a couple times here?
Yeah, we
It's
went
kind of hard to
Columbus,
keep
Indy,
track.
Columbus, and before that, US Nats was in Indianapolis for like 3 or 4 years. So, um,
Yeah,
we've had the US national tournament, whatever you want to call it, NAIC US Nats in Indianapolis, like just as many times as Columbus. Now it's like four each or something.
yeah. It's honestly hard to keep track of all this stuff. Sometimes even between, like, there was this stretch of tournaments earlier this year where it was like weekend after weekend after weekend, and I was in uh Milwaukee, and I like didn't remember what city I was in because like I had been to like so many tournaments the last few weeks before that. So, one of the tournaments at least, but
It would be
yeah,
cool to see like. I mean, I guess that's kind of like for most people in the US, this is the optimal location, Midwest, probably, right? Like
for
for
sure.
just like for the majority of people, just putting it in the Midwest is probably best. And maybe I assume that's what they try and do for most of these ICs. And if anyone who lives in, Europe, who lives in, Australia or in Brazil, let us know. Is like Sao Paulo like a reasonable? Do you think like for the countrywide or the
The
countrywide
region
area,
wide.
the region wide area, is that like a reasonable location for a majority? Not maybe not yourself personally, but for like the majority of people. Like I would love it if it was in California because then I could probably drive to it. But if I'm being, like realistic, it makes sense for it to be in the Midwest, right? In America, I feel like. I wonder if that's the same for London and for Melbourne and Sao Paulo. Is that like just a very nice central location for the majority of the region,
And that definitely
or is it
makes
better locations?
it definitely makes sense for that to be the priority, right? Focus on that
Yeah,
region's, player base. Wherever
yeah,
most of the player base is, let's go to a tournament that's easy enough for that amount of the player base to get there.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, definitely. But so for America, for us Americans, it feels good. A little bit of a feels bad. And for anyone who's like, or for some of us Americans, it's a little bit of a feels bad. I'm sure a ton of people in the Midwest love driving there. But for anyone who's like coming, overseas, there's definitely some better locations you could be hitting up besides
yeah, I always joke with
Ohio
people.
and
It's like
Indiana.
you would imagine with those international cities, like we're going to New York or we're going to LA, Vegas, Orlando. Nope. Columbus, Ohio, baby. So we've actually got a little
Sure.
bit of an update from something we talked about last week and the week before. We've talked about this a couple times on the cast now, I think.
Yeah.
And that was exactly how the Japanese tournament structure works, because If you don't know, they've got their whole own series of tournaments. It's totally separate from what we do in the western part of the world, TPCI. Their tournament structure is operated by the Pokemon Company, ours by the Pokemon Company International. And Tuan Lei actually gave Azul a little bit of information about this. If you don't know who Tuan is, we use their translations a lot of the time on the podcast, especially when stuff has just come out. And they're one of the better translators for revealing cards once they get released in Japan and translating them. So go check them out over on Twitter if you have not. But yeah, Azul, you want to share with us what Tuan was able to share with you?
Yeah. So big shout out to Tuan. Hit me up on Twitter and was like, "Yo, I heard on the podcast you were talking about the Japanese competitive circuit. Do you want me to give you a breakdown?" I was like, "Yes, for sure. Be sure to go follow them on Twitter. Like Chip said, they're always translating the new cards that get revealed in Japan, so we can quickly learn about them here in America, or be able to learn what the cards do, translate them to English. So go follow them at TOINELAY on the Twitters. So yeah, let's get into it. So the first thing is the main way to qualify for the Worlds in Japan is to be among the top players in championship points rankings. They have yet to announce top how many it will be this year. Should be somewhere around top 50. So that's going back to, like, we used to have that system for ELO, and then I think CP for 1 year as well after that, if I remember correctly.
That's
And I have to
before my
say, I
time,
think
so I
that
don't remember
is
that.
I think part of that system. I think that part of the system. I always just think that kind of system is bad. I'm never a fan of top X. I think there should be some goal you just have to try and achieve, and if you get that, you're good to go, right? Especially when, like, Pokemon. I guess, like, this goes back to the thing I always say about Pokemon. Pokemon, like, it's not like we're just taking the best players in the world and they're playing Pokemon. A system like that would make a little bit more sense for that, but this really is kind of from Pee Wee soccer all the way up to the professional leagues, right? So just setting, like, some bar you have to reach to get the world. What's it called? So they have that top X, and then they got three main types of events in Japan. They got the Trainers League, small 16-player events held in stores, so like probably league challenges, league cups. You can get CP in those, but it's capped at 30 CP for the whole season, so you can't get more than 30 CP from the Trainers Leagues. Then they got City Leagues, 16 to 64 players events. So I guess those would be more like league cups. Are the main CP earners. They're held all across Japan in batches, which they call seasons, which is kind of confusing. So I guess that'd be like kind of going back to like battle roads, or like when we had cities in the Pokemon, and like in North America, where it was like cities happened at one period of the year, and then battle roads, there was spring battle roads and fall battle roads throughout the year as well. So we kind of going back to something like that, I guess, for anyone who used to play back then.
Well, and with League Cups, that's kind of what they've done more recently, is
Yeah,
that
yeah.
there's each store can run one League Cup per season, and then the season goes along with the main set releases, right? So
Oh
like,
yeah, so we basically have that as well.
yeah,
I forgot about that. It's been so long. It's been
it
like 3
has.
years.
Yeah, so it would be like the Unified Minds League Cup, and then the next one would
Yeah,
have
that's
been the
right.
Cosmic Eclipse League Cup, so on and so forth.
So there's 4 to 5 batches per year, and you get to play in one city league event per batch. Okay, those get between 25 to 100 points for top cutting. Um, Registration for city leagues this year is done through lottery, but there's enough of them that 90% of players will get a spot. Okay, so that's good to hear. Then you have Champions Leagues, the big events with attendances reaching thousands of players. These are so hyped and popular that only about 30% of the players entering the lottery get to participate. Yes, the 3,000 Masters
Jeez.
in Yokohama Champions League were about a third of all the players who had entered. They don't give any CP. So that was like the first thing that I thought was really weird. So you don't get 3,000 players showed up to not get any championship points towards their Worlds invite. Although they do give you a chance to qualify immediately for day one of Worlds by making top 4. If you top 4 one of these 3,000 person events, you get your invite. That
I
is
mean, I think
crazy.
that's pretty deserved, though, right?
Well,
If you,
no, yes, but that's crazy that only
yeah,
top 4.
and that's the only thing. There's no cash prize as well, right? There's no like,
No cash prize in Japan, but they have a really cool. Tuan mentioned that they do have really cool, like, championship cards and other products like that you do get for placing well or like showing up to events and stuff. So
I think like the top 32 gets exclusive sleeves and stuff like that too, which I think are pretty valuable on the secondary market, the
yeah.
secondhand market. But
Yeah, hopefully they get something. But yeah, that's so 3,000 players get to play. Top 4 of them get the World's invite, but that's out of like 10,000 players who tried to get into the tournament.
Yeah.
So they do a lottery system for these bigger events where you can all apply to get into the event, but they only allow so many into the event in the end. Um, there's actually a few ways to skip the whole lottery thing for Champions Leagues. Players who top cut the previous big event get a guaranteed spot, for example. And I do believe this year the Elite Four, which Shintaro is part of. So last or the week before last, I was asking the question. I was like, okay, there's like lottery systems to get into big events, but then how do people like Shintaro like? I mean, Shintaro's obviously a great player, but like. You'd assume if like some years you would just kind of get screwed and just not make it through these lottery systems and then not be able to play in the events, which means you can't get a Worlds invite. But they do, and I've heard of this before. And once Tuan mentioned this to me, I was like, oh yeah, I remember someone telling me about this. So they have an Elite Four in Japan, which is 4 players. Um, 2 of them are the highest placing players. And actually, someone commented on the YouTube video
Yes.
the week before last with what this is. So I'm gonna read that comment real fast. Let me find it.
I definitely think the
Must have
concept
missed it.
of like an Elite Four is very cool. Where it's like you have a few players that kind of get
Yeah,
highlighted throughout the year, but at the same time, I can also see a world where some people would feel like, you know, a little bit of favoritism being shown to certain players is not a great thing. So I don't know. I mean, I can see kind of both sides of it here, where it's like, why is it fair that this person gets to have an automatic spot into all these champion leagues that a third of the people who want to play in can actually get to? But then it makes sense because it's like these are people who are doing something for the game, right? Like Shintaro has a big
yeah,
YouTube channel and is like one of the best players in the world. So, them being at the event is definitely a driving force to maybe getting other people to come and show up.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And yeah, actually, I think it's pretty. It seems like it's pretty deserving, especially. So someone commented on the YouTube video 2 weeks ago. Basically, in Japan, they have an Elite Four system where every year the top 2 best performing Japanese players at Worlds, which was Daichi, and I might be screwing up the other player's name, Yamashi. Yamashi. I tried my best. I apologize. So they're part of the Elite Four, and then 2 from the members of the Elite Four last year, plus other notable players that TPC picks from doing well in Japan in CLs and JCSs. Then those remaining players play a double elimination bracket to determine the last 2 members of the Elite Four for that year. And Shintaro. So Shintaro had to play for their spot this year. So they took Daichi and Miyashi, and then Shintaro and Yoshi. Not going to try and pronounce the full name. Yoshi had to play for their spots in the Elite Four, and they both were able to keep their spots in the Elite Four. It looks like so. Those are the Elite Four in Japan for this year around, and then next year, top 2 placing players from Worlds plus the other players, play in a double elimination bracket to try and keep their spots in the Elite Four. So I think that's a pretty cool system they got going on. And it does seem like it is pretty, deserving. The top 2 placing players from Worlds, and the other players still have to play for their spots, keep them to go into the next season.
Yeah, definitely cool. And I think there's some parts of that system that I think are obviously not the best. I think that getting top 32 at 3,000 person tournament should probably get you some championship points, right?
Yeah.
But there are some parts of it I really like where there's something to play for, that someone could show up with no championship points, have an insane run, make top 4, and then they get to play in Worlds. I think that's pretty hype. And I wish that was something that TPCI would do, maybe not at the regional level, but at least at the international level. Now, I
Yeah.
mean, if you get top, if you win NAI, or if you win in internationals, you get 500 points, which is enough for your invite as a North
Yeah.
American master. And if you get top cuts, maybe that's enough depending on where your region is, depending on what your points requirement is. But I think it would be really cool if they just gave enough points, like an auto invite to people who got top 8 or top 4 at IC level events, because that gives us a chance that adds more invites to that specific region, most likely. And also gives people something to play for, even if they go into the event without championship points. Like something I've heard from players before. This is maybe more at the regional level than at an international level, but it's like, why am I going to go to this regional that's 3 hours away from me if I only have 50 CP this year? It's at the end of the year.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get my Worlds invite. But if they had a chance to maybe get their invite if they got second place or top 4, or they won the tournament, that gives them a little bit more of an incentive to potentially play towards.
Yeah, definitely. And Noah, who got top 8 at NAIC, this last NAIC did not get their invite, but they'd only been playing for like 2 events. They played in Milwaukee and NAIC since they made their comeback to the game. So like that's an example. And I actually had a friend who back in the day when we had state championships was out of states and decided to scoop their last round because the CP didn't matter to them. So they gave the scoop to their friend. They're like, I would have to top 8 nationals to get my worlds invite at this point. There's no way I need these points. I'm going to scoop to you. You can have the championship points. Good luck in top 8. And then they got top 8 at nationals that year and did not get their invite.
Yeah, that's a feels bad.
So one more tournament they have the Japan Championships held at the end of the year. Top placing players from Champions Leagues as well as the top 200 players in championship point rankings get to participate along with a bunch of people who get in through the lottery system. Still no CP on the line here, but the top 16 players get a day 2 invite, and then top 4 also get a travel award to the World Championship. So that's like their last term at the end of the year. So that's a really interesting
That's
system, I
kind of
feel like,
cool.
overall.
It's almost like a
Yeah.
national. I mean, it is a national championship, pretty much, right? Where
Yeah.
it's like you're bringing everyone who did the best throughout the entire year together and giving them one last thing to play for. That's pretty cool, and I wish that would be really cool if they did something like that here, where they took like the top 16 NA players, and instead of because like currently in North America, the top 16 players get a travel stipend, the top 4 players get a travel award. What if they brought the top 16 players together and then had them play a double elim bracket and then gave the top 4 the travel award? That'd be pretty hype, honestly, right?
That would be cool. Yeah, that would actually be pretty sick. It would definitely be cool to see some more events kind of like that, invitational type events in general, for sure. But yeah, interesting system. The weird thing to me, of course, is that they break up some events give CP and others don't. So as
Yeah.
far as from what I made out from this, only the city leagues and the championship leagues give oh no, not championship leagues, the city leagues and the one before that,
The town league or whatever.
the trainers leagues give
Trainers league.
CP. It seems like those are the only ones that give CP, and then like top 50 or so players with CP at the end of the year get invites, and then the other invites are awarded through the much bigger events, but they don't give any CP. You have to just do well at those big events, and then you end up with your world's invite, which which is interesting. And yeah, I think like from what you're saying, Chip, it would be nice to have at least here in North America. It'd be nice to have both. Like you have your way to get your CP invite, but then also if you just do really well at some of these big events, you just pull your invite. Like it's possible to win 2 regionals and not get your invite. I think if you go to 2 regionals and win 2 regionals, you probably have an extra 100 CP to spare somewhere. But it's possible to do that and not get a world's invite, which would be pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, if we never get league cups, like that could happen to someone.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
But
Yeah, that covers the Japan invite structure. So
so
thanks to Twan again for reaching out and hooking us up with all the information because I was definitely very interested to know, and I'm glad to know now. They definitely have a very interesting system over there.
it's definitely different, and I think that there are things I like better about it and things that I dislike about it. But there's things that I think are great in our system and then there are things that I don't think work very well in our current system. So let us know maybe in the comments which of the 2 systems you prefer or how you would like to see them combine to make
The
maybe they could
ultimate
take
system.
notes from one another and figure out a better system for both parties. The wildest thing to me though is that there's 10,000 people in Japan
Yeah,
that want to play in these champion leagues tournaments and only 1/3 of them get spots. I mean, and which is
insane.
massive still. 3,000 people has to be close to the largest Pokemon tournament ever, if not the largest ever. And I mean maybe some old school tournament had way more, but
I don't
it's
think so.
that's yeah, that's wild.
Yeah. And I want that probably does have to do a little bit maybe with how because they definitely have less major tournaments than we do like in North America. Obviously still a very big player base, but if we had like less regionals throughout our year, I'm sure our regionals would be quite a bit bigger as well. But maybe not because we also have NAIC that happens, and even then, NAIC doesn't even get close to that kind of attention to go to that tournament. I don't feel like we've had like 1 year where registration for NAIC filled up really really fast, but besides that, I feel like it's registration's been open for a little while most of the time. So, yeah, I feel like maybe even with that, yeah, we wouldn't even be hitting those kind of numbers even if we had less regionals throughout the year. But still good to see in general the game growing over here, over there. But yeah, it is crazy. 10,000 people wanting to play in a Pokemon tournament.
Well, we can move on from that. Shout outs once again to Twan for hooking us up with a little bit of extra info. And hopefully that was useful to anyone else listening who was curious about how it worked. But yeah, we'll move on from that. And now we can talk about the Warsaw Regional Championships, which took place this past weekend in Poland. This was the final regional championships of the Lost Origin format, Sword and Shield through Lost Origin. Last tournament before, Lugia just wrecks everyone's world in Brazil in a couple weeks. But yeah, some interesting results over there. We don't have like the full day 2 or day 1 meta breakdown, but we do have the top 8 that we can talk about as far as what the meta looked like there. We have 2 Giratina Lost Zone engines. We have 2 Arceus Giratinas, and then a bunch of one-off decks. We've got 1 Kyurem, 1 Palkia, 1 Sableye Charizard, and 1 Vikavolt in top cut.
Yeah, so a lot of different things coming out here. Pedro, of course, taking it all down with the Lost Box, and then Alex Szymanski coming all the way from America over there to get just short, ended up at second place with the the Giratina Lost Box.
Hey, we said we were
Um,
rooting last week for any Americans heading
yeah,
over. Alex almost able to pull it out, but no,
yeah,
Pedro comes out on top.
almost to take one back from America toward winning Peoria.
Yeah,
Almost.
so close.
We'll
And
get him next
interesting
time. We'll get him
enough,
next
the
time.
same deck that Tord used in Peoria, the
Yeah.
Sableye Charizard deck, is what Pedro played in Warsaw. So, thoughts, Azul, on the winning of Lost Box, winning the first regionals in this format, kind of having middling results throughout the rest of the format. I actually don't even know if it had another top 8 cut at a regional championships through the rest of the format,
Maybe
uh,
didn't
and
actually.
then wins the last tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I think the deck has always been really, really strong. The only reason I never played it at a regional, it was definitely on my list of decks to consider playing. The reason I didn't play it was because I just thought Reggie was a little bit better. But I think it is a tier 1 deck for sure in this format. You know, as we head out of this format into um, Silver Tempest, and I think it'll continue to be a tier 1 deck in Silver Tempest. Or should I say like tier A, because we got to give Lugia tier S. We
All
call
on
it
its
tier zero.
own.
Tier zero. I think Lugia is on its own a little bit up there, but no, I think it's super strong deck. I think it is. I kind of like talked about that a couple weeks ago. It's an intimidating deck to play. A lot of people they see it, they play a couple games with it, and they don't want to try it. They don't want to go further with it. So I think it is a very intimidating deck. I don't think it's as hard to play as people think it is, but it is pretty intimidating to want to pick up and learn how to play when there's so many other decks that are so much easier to play than it. So I understand that. I think that is one of the reasons for its not lack of success, because obviously at the end of it all, it was fairly successful with the wins. But lack of overall placements is just not many people played it. It was not ever, in like the top 4 most popular decks, I don't think.
No.
Maybe for this one, but I doubt it.
Yeah, it was usually that deck that was the 5th most popular deck, and I
Yeah.
think most of the North American tournament graphics at least. But yeah, obviously insanely strong. I mean, there's just so many different plays you can make. Sableye is such a versatile card. Any type of spread deck like this that is really powerful, it takes a lot for a spread deck to be a top tier deck, right? There's been lots of spread decks throughout the years that um, have been like decent, but when you start to play against really good players who can kind of manage their resources properly and like, play around, not benching too many things. Like I'm thinking back to like the Tapu Koko spread days. Like that was always a fun deck to play, but it was never top tier because people at the top level could play around it. This deck didn't really give your opponent as much room to play around things just because of how strong Sableye was once you got to those 10 cards in the Lost Zone.
Yeah, exactly. And it's almost more of like it's almost not even a spread deck. So you have the early game pressure
Yeah,
from the
yeah.
Cramorant. Sableye is either picking off knockouts off the bench or setting up knockouts for Charizard later, or like going for like a 2-hit KO with the Sableye. So it's not full spread, but yeah, it is. I mean, with that much versatility of options for attack, you're doing 12 damage counters wherever you want one turn, and then 250 the next turn. It offers a ton of options and versatility to the deck, for sure. So yeah, has its options. Yeah, I think the last good spread deck was probably Weezing. I love that deck. That was one of my favorites. And we usually see like, I mean, I guess in most recent times when the deck has more like little light damage with spread options, you do need some kind of big closer. Just like in Weezing, you had like the Larvitar and the Rotom, the Frost Rotom. I think you have the Charizard in this deck. You need some big heavy hitters still, because I mean these V Stars got a lot of HP.
So I saw this pretty interesting graphic from Trainer Hill that compared Tord's winning list from Peoria to Pedro's winning list from Warsaw. That showed the differences between the two lists. So they had 51 of the same cards. and then 9 cards different on each side. So I thought that some of those cards were really interesting that they chose to be different. And it's actually kind of funny too, because I remember one of the examples here is that Tord did not play Echoing Horn. Pedro did have the Echoing Horn. And I remember speaking to Tord after Peoria and him saying, there were so many times this tournament that if I just had an Echoing Horn in my deck, I would have won the game, but I
Yeah.
didn't play Echoing Horn. And that was a change that Pedro ended up making.
Yeah. So I think this is less of so I don't so now I'm reading the tweet from Trainer Hill here, and I've clicked on this. It is cool to see, but they end the tweet with which text do you prefer? And I think that's a bad way to look at it. It's more so look at how the deck has evolved with the shift of the meta. There's no way you would take Tord's list and play the exact same 60 at this tournament, and I doubt Pedro would have done as well had Pedro taken the exact same 60 that Tord played, in Peoria. This is just the evolution of the deck to the point where Pedro now thinks this is as close as they got to finding what is the optimal 60 for this tournament, right? So I don't think you would take Tord 60 and run it again because there's been new and better ways discovered to play the deck, especially once you have a better idea of what the meta looks like, right?
Yeah.
Like the Echoing Horn is there for a reason, right? And you need less paths to the peak, and Magma Basin is a good option, so that makes its way in there and so on, right?
Yeah, the Magma Basin and the Choice Belt, both really strong cards for the Charizard specifically. Whereas on Tord's end, the most damage he could do in one attack was 250 damage with Charizard. Pedro now has a chance to do 280 one hit KO V stars, or get a little closer to that V max number, which you could have set up with a Sableye previously. And the Magma Basin, in Tord's list, he doesn't have Magma Basin. So the earliest, there's no Raihan or anything like that in this deck. The earliest that Tord could attack with Charizard was when his opponent went to 2 prize cards. Pedro can now attack with Charizard a whole turn earlier because he has access to the Magma Basin option.
Yeah, it gives you that extra, and also like sometimes in the early game you just discard Fire Energy because you're retreating Comfy, so like gives you instead of
Yeah,
having to use Clara to like get the fire back, you can just put a Magma Basin in play. Now you can still go like Charizard, and then you have 2 Claras and got to find one of them to make to recover the Charizard. But yeah, definitely the evolution of the deck is interesting for sure, but it's not like yeah, it's not like I wouldn't say it's like a difference in like tech cards or anything. It's just like the
sure.
evolution of the deck from Peoria to now Warsaw with Pedro.
And then Alex Shemansky getting second place with Giratina. I think what has ended up becoming the most popular deck of the format, but still
Yep.
one of the most powerful decks in the format. His list doesn't look crazy different from what we've seen. It looks really similar to Nico's list from top 4 of the Lille Regional Championships a few weekends ago, where he's got the Thornton in here, the 2-3 Giratina VSTAR line. Well, one thing that was a little interesting to me is that there's just one capture energy, that's pretty light on the energy compared to
Yeah.
what most lists have been that I've seen. Um, but other than that, this is pretty standard to what we've seen from Guillotine. I guess the Snorlax is maybe another difference in here as well that not
Yeah.
everyone is playing.
Yeah, I saw Alex actually tweeted out that they had played very few games with the deck before the tournament, no practicing, like 2 games, and just took Nico's list and changed and put a Drapion
I
in
had missed
there
that. Yeah,
um, to better combat the Muse. I poked a little bit of fun at the Europeans for little regionals, and we saw a lot more Drapion. Whenever I tuned into the stream, I felt like every deck I saw had a Drapion in it. So no one in Europe was gonna allow Mew to get another dub
well, they weren't going to
over
allow
in
you to
Europe.
flame the
Yeah,
whole region again for letting Mew
I
win
mean,
another tournament.
I would have brought it up if if Mew had been able to do it again. I definitely would have brought it up. But yeah, way more Drapion I think this time around. I'm pretty sure all the Tinas were packing it, and I saw some of the Palkias brought it as well. So but yeah, so basically just taking Nico's list is what I believe I saw Alex tweet saying, changed a couple cards, called it a day, and ended up getting second place. And yeah, Tina, maybe the best overall deck at the end of the day in the format, right? I feel like you got a ton of different attacking options, and Giratina is so powerful by itself that covers most of your bases, right? And it's just a good deck.
Yeah, so as we do put a little bit of a bookend on this format, I mean, it definitely has ended up being one of the more diverse formats
Yeah.
of the whole Sword and Shield block, I feel like, so far, where we've just got so many different decks. I mean, look at this top cut. We've got 6 different decks out of our top 8 at a, 700-person tournament. Doesn't
Yeah.
really happen all that often.
Yeah, no Mew. So no Mew at all in top 8. And I think Arc Tina was. I feel like this is a deck I never gave the time of day, to be honest, was Arctina, because I always felt like its Lost Zone Tina matchup was unfavorable, which is like, why would you take a unfavorable matchup to the most popular deck in the room? But two of them in top eight, I feel like it was slowly starting to build up steam. And now this is like, before it actually gets a chance to like peak and maybe contend for a championship win, it's about to get stomped by Lugia. So it's never going to have its time. And the most interesting deck in top eight, of course, has to be that Palkia. Uh, the Palkia Vikavolt, right? I can't pronounce. I have no idea how to pronounce Alexander. Did I get that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, was running a Palkia Vikavolt deck, which is, Vikavolt has been a card that is like, it's item lock. So item lock is very powerful, but it's always been kind of up and down. There's never been like a like, a top deck that everyone kind of respects as far as a Vika Vault build goes. We've seen some gimmicky builds in the past with like Moltres V. This one specifically is kind of like Turbo Palkia plus Vika Vault, which is interesting. And they got top eight with it. It's a very cool deck. But yeah, I'm not sure too much to think of it. Definitely the most interesting deck in top eight, but I don't really have, I don't know what really to think of it when I look at it, to be honest.
Yeah, very cool one for sure. I always love to see unique stuff like this. Also, the Mew from Celebrations is such a cool card that I think has never really had a huge time. Like this engine, I guess. Like we've seen people do really well with like a one of Mew in their deck as
Yeah.
in their Intellion decks as like a anti Roxanne answer, anti Marnie. But I think like using the Mew engine similar to the old Jirachi from Team Up engine where you're switching between a bunch of them over and over again using a bunch of Mysterious Tails in a turn has always been really cool to me, but it's just like you got to have good enough stuff to draw through. I mean, I guess that Turbo Palkia deck from
Turbo
when
Palkia.
yeah, that's probably the one other time we've
And
really seen it do
Dialga.
well. Yeah, sure.
But Dialga never really like did anything.
Sure,
it
sure.
did play for Mew, and but that's about it.
So very cool. Always love seeing someone do well with something unique, and Alexander was definitely able to do that. So shout outs to them for that.
Yeah,
But
yeah. So yeah,
all right, let's before we close it off here. Um, Underrated deck of the format and overrated deck of the format in your mind.
Sheesh, that's a tough one. Overrated, definitely Kiram for me. Never been a big fan of the deck. Once it got third here in Warsaw at the end, and it showed up in most top eights throughout the regional cycle here in this format. A lot of top eights, never got a dub. It did get a actually, I take that back. It did get a dub over in where was it? In
Indonesia.
Indonesia, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it did actually get a dub in the end. Showed up a lot. I know most of the top eights. I think, in my opinion, Kiram's the overrated, underrated. I kind of want to give it to Palkia, but I think Palkia earned its respect back as this format kind of developed for
It's so
sure. So
funny
I don't know
to
if I can.
hear Palkia be a consideration
Oh, no,
for
no, 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 no.
an
Hang on.
underrated deck.
I'm taking a look at like the meta decks right now. It's got to be Reggie. I think Reggie is still. I think it. We didn't see any results from it in Europe. The last two, or even in Malaysia or the Indonesia, there was quite a bit of it at Warsaw, but none of them in top eight. None of them in top eight at Lille, despite it being the first seed going into day two. So I think Reggie is still. I'm gonna give it the underrated deck of this format, and overrated is definitely Kiram.
Yeah, I'm less of a Kurum hater than you. I think it's
I think
it's
everyone is.
yeah, maybe so, but I mean, I do think Kurum like is just inherently pretty powerful. It does feel in a format with Giratina that can just do the 280 so easily and like feels pretty streamlined. It feels almost like too fair of a Pokemon deck where it's like you're not drawing a ton of cards every turn like you are with some of these other decks. You're not seeing everything with Intellion or Comfy Chorus Experiment to see 7+ cards every single turn. You're playing an Irida to get one thing out, or you're playing a Melanie to just draw 3 cards. What you're doing is inherently still really powerful, the ability to accelerate the energy and stuff like that, but it feels just much more, it's a slower paced deck than pretty much everything else in the format, it feels like. Which is
Definitely.
weird because it puts on more pressure, I think, almost than a lot of the decks in the format, especially whenever you like go second and get off that rapid freeze and can get a bunch of energy in play. But
Yeah.
regardless,
I feel like it gets isolated really fast. Like once your first attacker goes down or you burn a lot of energy out of
sure.
play, it's like, okay, there's opportunities for like every deck to kind of make a comeback against it in those
Yeah.
kind of situations. But
It can
uh,
definitely run out of gas for sure. But I
yeah.
think for me, overrated deck of the format has got to be the Arceus Gudra. which maybe it's adequately rated, I guess I should say. I still
Maybe it
feel like
falls
it's
in there.
got
Yeah.
its heavy defenders. It obviously did win a regional championships, but I still just got to feel like, you know, Hale's a great player who won the regionals with it. So he obviously made probably very few mistakes throughout the course of the tournament. And then he just made it into day two and hit a Reggie bracket where it was just like he was able to just make it through. So I almost like, I mean, I'm not going to call it a fluke because it's definitely not a fluke. Hale very much deserved his win and he very much believed in the deck, which I think is great. But it's just, I don't know that if we run the tournament back, if Gudra is going to come out on top once again. Um, and
It might be
then
a little bit tougher to make it through again.
I think an underrated deck for me is going to be that Hisuian Zoroark, a deck we've talked about a lot. I do think it is still really, really strong. And it did get first place at the Malaysia Regional League tournament. That player went 10-0 with the deck. So, yeah, I think Zoroark is a deck that and every single time we see a list pop up that does well with it, it looks different from the last list. I feel like,
Yeah.
it's there's never been where, as opposed to Giratina, it feels like there's a set 55 cards that pretty much everyone plays, and like people make a couple changes here and there, whereas with Zoroark I feel like it's more like 45 to 50 cards, and then we'll see a bunch of variations and different ways that people try to play the deck. So I don't know that Zoroark ever got fully optimized to its full potential in this format, but maybe in this next format into Lugia it can one hit KO a Lugia, so we'll see what happens there.
True.
Maybe Zoroark could have a chance to shine still at some
Yeah,
point
it's
in the Silver Tempest format.
it's possible. Actually, Finnegan Lynch just came out with an article preaching Rotom Phone in Zoroark over trekking shoes, which I've been a big trekking shoes stan. But I did like some of the reasons behind the Rotom Phone, so I might try that out. That might be the missing piece. I have yet to see anyone playing Rotom Phone in Zoroark, so maybe Finn's just been holding out on everyone and just had the secret sauce this whole time, and now is finally letting everyone know this is how you could have been winning all these regionals in the Lost Origin format with Zoroark, but instead y'all were shooing around.
So we will say goodbye for now to the Lost Origin format, and we will say hello to everyone's favorite segment of the podcast. Guess that flavor text. I think we need some game show tunes or something going on. Do, 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 guess that flavor text. For those who don't know, every single week, Azul or I will pick a card, read the flavor text off it, the fun little bit of text in the bottom right hand corner, and have the other host try to guess which Pokemon we are reading off the card. We do keep track of points here. We are currently tied at 4-4. And if you do get the flavor text right, you get 4 points, but there is a chance to use some lifelines. Every time you use a lifeline, you lose a potential point you could earn. So you could earn anywhere from 1 to 4 points in a given week. And those 3 lifelines are what set the card is from, what stage the card is, and read an attack name. Like I said, we are tied at 4-4. Azul gave me a tough one last week. I was unable to get it. I did see some YouTube comments, though, that some people were able to come to the correct conclusion. But I've got one picked out for Azul this week. We'll see if he can get it. Azul, are you ready, my friend?
I'm ready, Chip. Hit me with it.
Let's do it. It stands in grasslands, watching the sun's descent from zenith to horizon. This Pokemon has a talent for delivering dynamic kicks.
Oh my gosh. There's so many Pokemon. Well, hold on. Oh, okay. Hold up. I think. Well, that sounds very Zen and yoga like. Metacham is very Zen and yoga like. I could go for the slam dunk here and lock in Metacham. There's a bunch of other Pokemon that involve kicking. Like, Hitmonlee, Hitmonchan, but none of them are very Zen or yoga like. Go ahead, read it to me one more time.
It stands in grasslands, watching the sun's descent from zenith to horizon. This Pokemon has a talent for delivering dynamic kicks.
It still sounds a ton like Metacham, but I guess we could go through a couple lifelines to confirm. All right, what stage is the card?
It is a basic.
Is Metacham a basic? I actually don't remember. No, because it evolves from Metatite, right? Metatite, Metacham.
That is correct.
It could be Metatite then. Dynamic kicks. I mean, it's still kick Pokemon, I think. The other two are what set and read an attack name. Oh, so let's go with an attack name then.
Lost Shot.
Now I have no clue. But Metatite is psychic type sometimes, I believe. So we're gonna, because the set, knowing the set probably won't tell me anything, and I won't be able to utilize that information at all. So I'm gonna lock in Metatite.
That is incorrect, Azul. Did
Oh,
not get it right this week. And in case anyone is playing along at home, I will read the last lifeline. What set the card is from? It is from Lost Origin, which you probably could have gotten as well by the name of the attack, Lost Shot. The effect of
true.
Lost
And
Shot.
I would have known that it wasn't Metatite. I think if I knew that, there's no Metatite in
Should
Lost
have used your
Origin.
lifeline. Should have used your lifeline.
All right, the effect.
The effect of that Lost Shot attack. Maybe we should add that as a lifeline in there somewhere. Put the or if you read an attack name, you have to read the effect too. Put the put the top card of your opponent's deck in the Lost Zone.
Who is it?
It is Stone Journer.
Okay, I would have never gotten to Stone Journer.
It does have a different attack name that I think would have put you a little closer to it. Its other attack is Power Stone.
That might have got me closer to a Stone Journer, yeah. I can picture the Stone Journer you're talking about. I remember reading it when I initially looked through Lost Origin. I would have never got there. You said kick. I guess Stone Journer does kick. I think about all the artwork.
I didn't know that, but there he is.
Think about all the Stone Journer artworks. It's like two legs, and they are kicking a lot of the time, actually. So, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
he do be kicking. And he definitely, being the Stonehenge Pokemon or whatever, gets to stand and watch plenty of sunrises and sunsets, right?
That also makes sense. I thought I had it. I thought I was there, and then I was like, all right, it's a basic, so maybe Metatite.
I was really hoping you were gonna lock in the 4-point Metacham guess and be so wrong.
But I would never would have got to Sun Journer even if I knew this set. I don't think for sure. All right, what?
That's payback for Spoopa.
New set coming out.
Whatever.
Our new set has come out, Silver Tempest, and I've played quite a bit with this set in general. Chip probably a little bit less so, a little bit busy with Junior. But I guess the first big thing is Lugia. What are your first impressions of Lugia, Chip? Do you think it's lived up to the hype so far?
Yeah, I have played a bit. I have not played as much as I will play a good bit more this week for sure. But what I did play, I played some Lugia, and it's definitely strong. And I think that what I've kind of gathered from Lugia, both playing it and watching people play it, is one of the big strengths of Lugia is not the obviously it is a solid attacker, but it is the fact that you can just power up so many other potential things with Archeops, right? So I think that that's really where it derives a lot of its strength from. Being able to power up Amazing Rare Eviltal out of nowhere, very strong. Radiant Charizard early on, very strong. Even something like Amazing Raikou, I have seen from some people, is a very good option as well. Lots of cool stuff going on with Lugia, and if all else fails, you can just start smacking them for 290 damage with Lugia's attack with a couple modifiers in there.
200 enough to KO most of the time.
Yeah, 200 and enough. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's been. I don't think it's as broken as I expected it to be, which is good. I do think it is probably the best overall deck in the format. It doesn't have many weaknesses. And it's very hard to exploit its weaknesses. Even its actual weakness to lightning can be taken care of by playing Dunsparce. So the deck doesn't have any weaknesses. And I think it is. Yeah, I think it's overall probably the best deck in the format. But I don't think it's by a mile like we kind of saw with Palkia and Mew. And I guess those are the main two recently. Arceus never really had that moment where it kind of dominated the formats ahead of those two. But it definitely did shape the format around it a little bit. Because you weren't beating Mew. If you were able to beat Mew but couldn't beat Arceus, you still couldn't play your deck. So, but I don't think it really brings that level of power to the format, which I'm really thankful for. I'm really glad that it ended up being a little bit more tame and reasonable.
Yeah, we'll see definitely a bit more what the general player base is doing when more and more, pretty much through the results of online events this coming week, right? Well, now that people have had a bit more of a chance to get their hands on some of the cards. They've tested it. We've seen a Lugia do okay in some online events so far. Really looking forward to seeing what the results look like from the late night tournament this week, though, because those usually have close to 300 people playing in them. So that'll give some sort of an indication as to maybe what some of the top level online players are looking at. So we'll see what kind of comes out of that. Now, I haven't been playing quite as much, but I've been watching plenty of people play. I've actually been watching your stream a decent bit, Azul, when I've been able to tune in. And I've seen you playing a lot of different stuff. I've seen some Chestnut V, some Hisuian Arcanine V. So I guess a
Work as a
question.
chestnut.
A question I would ask for you is, what is a card that has surprised you the most so far in Silver Tempest?
It's hard to say. There's not really that much to come out of Silver Tempest, to be honest. We got some. I think the thing that like will change up the most decks will probably be Serena, kind of how you build decks and play decks. And it does offer like some enhanced consistency to stuff like Mew and stuff for sure. So I don't want to say Serena really. Maybe Radiant Jirachi overall has surprised me a little bit more as less of just like its own gimmick deck and more so as you can kind of put that in anything that plays double turbo or twin energy, so mostly single prize decks. And if you just like swing with it turn one, even if you get double tails or like one tails, whatever, you don't get the knockout with it. If your opponent really want to leave it there to attack again and you want to really gust around it, or do you knock it out and give your opponent any three cards out of their deck? So to be honest, that has kind of surprised me as being more of not fully an engine in itself, but kind of some initial consistency and draw power that you can play in a lot of cool ways besides its own kind of gimmick deck. So yeah, I was really surprised by how versatile I guess the card is overall. Yeah, big fan of the Radiant Jirachi, I guess, in that way. It's not going to be played in a ton of decks still, but I think that surprised me the most as being something that a little bit better than I thought it was going to be. But besides that, to be honest, we didn't get a whole ton. The Drago and the Lecky, I think, are a little bit underwhelming. Drago specifically, the Regidrago, just
Yeah, I was never hype on the
yeah,
Regidrago, honestly. Like
I didn't think it was gonna get there, and I just don't think it does. And then for the Regilecky, I think it's solid with Fecal Vault, but I don't think it's quite there. Like it's not a meta deck.
yeah, I think that there's still a chance. I mean, yeah, Vikavolt, we talked about it earlier in the cast. Just item lock is so strong, and now being able to two hit KO stuff theoretically, if you get enough Regielekis in play, maybe if someone can find a really good consistent list to work with it, or maybe with a card coming out in the future, which we'll talk about here shortly, that Radiant Eternatus. Spoiler alert for later in the cast. Maybe we could see something there be decent, but yeah, I think that this feels like the Lugia set, and we get a couple cool trainers, right? And that's pretty much about it. Everything else, all of the other ultra rares feel pretty meh, feel pretty mid. The Forest Seal Stone is obviously insanely good. Um, Serena's
Mew.
insanely good, right? Mew definitely gets a big bump with this set, and I guess that's something to talk about is what old decks get some new life breathed into them in this set. And it's definitely Mew is the best one, right? Just through the Force
Yeah, I
Seal
think
Stone.
so.
And I even saw you as well. You were playing a little Mew on your stream, and you even had that new supporter card in there, the Worker, right? So that
Oh,
draw three, discard a stadium. I didn't
that
even
wasn't
realize.
seriously though.
I mean, yeah, it's not great, but I had even. It's like they just keep giving little things to Mew here and there, little options to it. But what I'm a
Yeah,
little worried about with the meta moving into Brazil is we have seen with the way that Mew decks have been built currently is that if you have a way to one hit KO one Mew VMAX and a Drapion, you're going to have a solid Mew matchup, right? Because nobody's
yep.
playing Meloetta. But that is going to entirely change if we go into Fusion Strike Mew with the Meloetta, if we go back to Pokemon catchers and stuff like that, because Drapion is nowhere near as strong into that version of it. It's still good, don't get me wrong, but it's nowhere near as strong as into the just straight Mew VMAX version of the deck, because Meloetta can take two prizes, and then, okay, you knock out the Meloetta. Then Mew VMAX takes two prizes, you Drapion the VMAX. Oh, all of a sudden, I only need two prizes to win the game.
Yeah, I think it's weird because the Meloetta builds I feel like are better against Lugia than the DTE build. Um, your Palkia matchup might be about the same. I think you are probably a little bit better as the DTE build, but also your Lost Zone matchups I think are way worse with the Meloetta build. because the Cram just takes care of the Meloetta, and then you have less disruption cards on your end as the Mew. You don't play. I mean, you can still play the Marnies and the Roxanne in the path, but then like, what are your how often are you sacrificing the turn one Meloetta attack for those things, right? And then at that point, are you even playing catchers? Are you going with cross switchers? So even then, trying to get off like a turn one Metal attack with double cross switchers, that's like another hurdle to kind of get through, to pull off that turn one KO on like a two prize Pokemon. So it's weird. Yeah, it's weird. I think like the double turbo build, basically you can't play it because I feel like it almost feels like you can't play it because the Lugia matchup feels unfavorable. And that's not even with Lugias putting in their own Drapion. Right now, Lugias don't play Drapion for pretty good reason because you don't actually have that many good starters in the deck. So if you play Drapion, you're going to open like Drapion, Crobat, or Luminion a lot of the time. So you don't really want to play any more bad starters in the Lugia deck, to be honest. But if they do go the route of Drapion, then it's going to be that much worse for Mew. And the Meloetta Mew, I feel like is, better of the two up against Lugia, but then you come up a little bit worse against the Lost Zone deck. So Mew's in a little bit of a weird spot. Still feels like it's probably a tier 1 deck, but needs to be figured out kind of its identity of like the best way to play it for sure.
So so if we're looking at like Lugia really kind of being the only big new deck, we talked about Mew a little bit. What about the other top tier decks from this last format? So I'm thinking of the Giratina, the Curums, maybe I should say most played. The Giratinas, the Curums, and the Palkia decks. Those three decks. What did they gain, if anything, from Silver Tempest? I mean, Serena, I think, obviously goes into most of these in some
Yeah.
capacity, but other than that, is there much?
Yeah, we didn't really get that much from this set. Like we got one big card and then like not even like support for other stuff besides like Serena, right? But it's not even like support, it's just like everyone adjusts because it is such a powerful card, you just adjust your supporter lineup, right? So it's like when we got research back or we got Marnie or whatever, like you had to like you just adjusted your supporter lineup around those cards. You didn't actually add it to kind of your overall deck strategy. I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain the way I'm thinking about it, but like, yeah, you didn't like nothing really changed. We got one big deck, and that's kind of it, which is kind of unfortunate. Like, right, not too much actually changed up with this set because I don't think Serena like drastically changes any way decks are built. Some decks get nerfed because it exists. Some decks get slightly buffed. Like Reggie, I think got a decent buff because it exists now because your Gust effect is also a draw supporter. So it makes it so much better for Reggie to run Gust effects to begin with. So some decks got a little buff, some decks got a little nerf because it exists, but that's about it. And then we just got Lugia, which is now another deck for you to worry about, but that's it. Just one deck. I think stuff like the Tinas and the Palkias, you probably have to run Temple of Sinnoh now, right? To be able to deal with the V Guard energy
Yeah.
on Lugia. And from what I've seen, so like I mentioned, not a huge fan of Kieran VMAX. And from what I've seen, definitely are less people playing it. And maybe it just doesn't stack up well into Lugia. And also Reggie has gotten way more popular in these online tournaments because gift energy is finally not bugged. And Kieran is a really good matchup for Reggie. So people are actually finally playing Reggie in these online tournaments.
So I was actually thinking, you were talking about Curum there for a second. And I was actually kind of thinking, is I wonder if there is a way with this new set that you could build Curum without Palkia, or at least with a thinner Palkia, where you're not as reliant on Palkia's V-Star power, and then you could utilize the Forest Seal Stone to more consistently set up, and also give yourself a potential late game out to the Path to the Peak. You know, you do still theoretically, if you play 4 Melanies and you've got the double Guru, right, you can get enough acceleration to get Curum powered up to where you're one hit KOing opposing Pokemon. And if you add in the potential of using the Forest Seal Stone, does that help you set up more efficiently through getting your energy acceleration through Melanie or something like that versus using your Palkia V-Star power? Now, I think Palkia is probably just too powerful of a Pokemon to not include because it is
Yeah.
also a very good attacker in that deck. But something I've wondered. And also, honestly, the Earth and Seal Stone doesn't seem terrible in Curum either, in the right scenario. But I don't know. That seems much less likely to be worth playing. Putting everything down to low HP where you can pretty easily knock it out with Curum. I guess everything Curum can kind of one hit KO most things. It's just about how many energies you have to discard, I guess. But I don't know. Just all kind of thoughts I have had. Different ways you could experiment with it potentially. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully there is some viability there with that. I mean, that's the first kind of Kyurem deck I built was just straight Kyurem.
Oh
Just only
yeah,
Kyurem, no Palkia.
yeah.
You don't fully lose access to the ability to utilize Greninja, but it definitely gets a lot harder to utilize Greninja when you don't have Palkia, especially for like an aggressive turn 2 Greninja, which is like it's not even so much that doing it is like you being able to do it. Like you're not gonna be able to do it all the time, but having the threat of it existing, it puts a lot of pressure on your opponent to play differently. Go get their mana fee, leave less Pokemon on their bench for you to take advantage of with. And if they don't play around it, that's when they get punished. You can get really far ahead. When they do play around it, they're not getting punished, but they have to manage their resources in a less aggressive way usually, which is once again could get you ahead. So I think the biggest thing would maybe be losing access to the aggressive Greninja routes you could take with the deck if you do uh, don't have access to Palkia consistently. Not that you wouldn't be able to do it at all, or that you always do it, but having the option of it is definitely a pretty big deal. Forcing your opponent to constantly play around that is definitely a big deal, which is something like when I played Ice Rider Palkia at Worlds, the amount of times that I Greninja'd was a lot. I Greninja'd a lot at that tournament. And a lot of people kind of got caught off guard by it because they weren't prioritizing me using Greninja. They were like, oh my gosh, there's an Ice Rider on their field. I got to deal with this thing.
Yeah.
And then they forgot to get their mana fee. And then I was like, all right, Greninja. And then I took out two of their Sobbles and stuff like that. So,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
so I feel like the
So
threat of it, you need to have it around.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, threatening Greninja, super strong. I mean, especially when, like you said, your opponent maybe doesn't always think about it.
Yeah. Sometimes they're not going to remember.
So is there anything, I can't remember if I might have asked you this, or we might have talked about this on last week's episode, but is there anything old that gets new life breathed into it with this set, either through new cards or through the meta changing
Well,
in a way that favors it? So, and the results from Japan, kind of the two decks that I've seen pop up at some of these City League tournaments on some of these pie charts on, the graphs on Twitter, has been Duraludon and Eternatus. Those are kind of the two decks that have had some sort of meta share in Japan, it seems like, as ways to deal with how dominant Lugia is.
so I don't think Duraludon does it. After doing very little testing in the matchup, Duraludon still is
Very little testing.
very after doing very little testing. I've come to the conclusion that Duraludon is still a pile and should not be played. And its Lugia matchup is not that good. And then for Eternatus, it's the deck just isn't good enough to compete with the rest of the field. Like you maybe have a good Lugia matchup. I don't actually even know if you do, to be honest. That was a deck that we both noticed that popped up on those meta breakdowns of some of the early Japan tournaments. Eternatus was there. I was like, what? Why is this here? But I think it was just there because there was probably some players who enjoyed playing Eternatus and showed up with Eternatus. That's kind of why it was probably
It does
played
get
more
use
so than
of the Forest Seal Stone, right? I think that's another big thing.
Yeah, you do have a lot of Crobats on play that you can just like put
Yeah.
that in play. So that might be enough of a boost, but I kind of doubt that is
Yeah.
going to be a big enough difference maker. So yeah, as far as old stuff coming back, I think Zorobox, which we talked about a lot last week, is the main thing that gets I think that might get the biggest boost as far as decks that I can kind of think about. I think there's room. I think Arceus decks are hurting a lot right now, and people are trying to figure out how can we, deal with Lugia consistently. So I think Arceus decks are hurting a lot right now and trying to figure out where they stand. What are the best ways to play Arceus? So I think that will be still discovered. I think there will probably be a tier 2 at least Arceus deck in the format. I don't know what it is yet. Not going to be Arceus Inteleon. That deck sucks. So it's going to be something like an Arceus Tina maybe, or even I'm thinking like some kind of tank Arceus with V-Guard energy sounds kind of cool. You play 4 V-Guard energy, maybe a couple
Radiant
less double
Gardevoir.
turbo. Yeah, with Radiant Gardevoir, you're taking minus 50, so you effectively have 330 HP, and you get Big Charms in there, or Parasols, or whatever you want. Something like that could be cool. So I think there's room for an Arceus deck for sure. We just gotta wait and see what it is. But I don't think there's anything else besides that really making a comeback that I can think of.
Yeah, it's hard to ever count Arceus out with just, the fact that its attack requires 3 colorless energy, so you can do pretty much anything with it. But
Yep, it's pretty good.
yeah, those are our early thoughts on Silver Tempest. Next week, we'll definitely have more in-depth thoughts once there's been a little bit of a meta developed from the online tournament scene. And next week, we'll be doing our meta breakdown and meta predictions, I guess I should say, for the upcoming Sao Paulo International Championships, which definitely looking forward to seeing what's going to happen there. And we'll move on to a couple of new cards that just got revealed at the end of last week. These are cards that are going to be in the VSTAR universe set in Japan, which will be part of our Crown Zenith set coming out in January.
Yeah, so I'm way more excited for just these couple cards that we've seen so far. And also we know a couple other ones that are coming out. So it's going to be these cards. We already know about Zacian, Zamazenta, V-Star. We'll finally get those. Rotom V-Star will probably be in there as well. And then we're also supposed to get a Charge-a-Bug, a Radiant Charge-a-Bug. So another Radiant coming out as well. So I'm already way more excited for this set than I ever was for Silver Tempest. Silver Tempest. Looked bad. It's felt pretty. As far as set releases go, I'm just gonna say it's felt bad. I'm still enjoying playing the game, and the new cards are always refreshing. But overall, as like a set release, a major set release, it's felt pretty bad in comparison,
It's
especially when
just
you're
less
just kind of
exciting, I think, is maybe the
yeah.
best way to say it. It's like it's just there's less there's one I think most people recognize there's one really good deck, and it's
Yeah, I
like
would have much rather like 3 tier 2 decks come out than 1 tier S deck for sure. That would have been so much more of an enjoyable experience with the new set release for sure. But yeah, getting into these new cards coming out, like Chip said, from V-Star Universe. The first one up is the Regigigas V-Star. We're not going to go over all of them, but just the ones that will probably have some impact on play. And I'm actually pretty excited for this one. So the V has Hammer in for 2 colorless energy, 50 damage, 240 HP as well, which is a lot of HP on a V. But wait until you hear about the V Star. And then for triple colorless energy, Raging Blow, 100 damage plus 10 more damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. This Pokemon is now confused for retreat cost, weak to fighting. And then the V Star, 300 HP, which is definitely the most on a V Star, right? That's not even
oh yeah.
close.
Yeah.
Huge. Colorless, Giga Impact, 230. This Pokemon can't attack during your next turn. And then a really interesting V Star power. It's got the ability Star Guardian. You can use the ability once in your turn. If your opponent has one prize card remaining, discard one of your opponent's bench Pokemon and all cards attached to it. So I think that is a ridiculously strong ability if you can force your opponent to that single prize card remaining. And the attack, 230, get a choice bell in there, you're doing 260, maybe a powerful energy, 280, right? It definitely seems like you're hitting hard. And then also another thing that I thought of was you could put memory capsule on this thing too, and then use the Raging Blow from the previous evolution of the Regigigas V. But what do you think about Reggie Chip?
Yeah, I think it seems really cool. I think that the best way to play it will be something similar with the memory capsule, like you were just mentioning, just because 300's a lot. And obviously, colorless Pokemon have the fallback of Dunsparce, right? Even though this thing is weak to fighting, I guess fighting Pokemon aren't the strongest right now anyway, but fighting is pretty much always one of the worst weaknesses to have in the Pokemon TCG.
Yep.
Um, Especially now because there's like easy counters that could be included into the meta, like Galarian Zapdos or something like that could pretty easily be played,
But we
splashed
do
into
still
some
have
decks.
Dunsparce.
But we still got Dunsparce. Yeah,
Yeah, we still got
exactly.
Dunsparce.
Yeah, exactly.
I
So,
hate Dunsparce. I hate
um,
Dunsparce so much.
but yeah, I think that this seems cool. I mean, I think that the V Star power is good, but I don't think I'm quite as hype on it as you are. Just because like I think that it has to be a very specific scenario that your opponent is at one prize card and you are needing to come back into the game in order for this to be useful, right? Because like the obvious combo is like there you can get their really strong built up Pokemon to the bench somehow, cross switch or escape rope, whatever, discard it, and then Roxanne them. That's like the best way
Yeah.
to try to come back into the game, which is really strong, but it's like that has to happen in order for this to be like your V Star power of choice. That has to happen enough in games to where you're finding yourself at like 4-1 prize cards or 3-1 prize cards, and you also have to force that odd prize game somewhere in there, and your opponent isn't able to find a boss or Serena to get around the 7 prize game.
All right, hear me out, Chip. Electrode, the one that KOs
Okay,
itself.
sure, you can force it that way, but doesn't that only attach to lightning Pokemon? So it's like,
No, I think it just gets 2 lightning energy and attaches them to your Pokemon.
okay,
So a little bit of an energy acceleration there. Oh no, it is to your lightning
that's what
Pokemon.
I thought.
But still, you could knock yourself out with Electrode. It still does it. Um, and then I mean, what I'm thinking here is like you don't like if you're like you're doing 230 damage, you can get that up. Like I said, choice belt, powerful energy, V guard energy on this thing is also makes it a beast. Like you get that HP, you get guard radiant guard war involved as well. You're taking minus 50 on something that's 300 HP. But yeah, if you just get to the point to the end game where you have one prize card or they have one prize card left, and you knock out their active and then discard their bench attacker, who has 3 attackers set up at the end of a game, right? Like that just sounds. Palkia only plays 3 attackers. They're done. They're cooked. If you knock out you knock out one of them to begin with, you knock out the second one, discard the third. They can't do anything anymore.
I mean, I do think it is good, but I mean, honestly, to me, like Regigigas just seems solid on its
Regigigas
own.
control. That's what
It,
it's
it
Regigigas
just
control
seems
now.
solid on its own, and to me, I would almost rather play this as an attacker with Memory Capsule and then like some Crobats, Luminion, and Forest Sealstone. That is kind of how I feel about it. Just to set up and do as much damage as possible as quickly as possible. That to me seems like the better way to play this deck.
Yeah, it could be. I could see it. A couple different ways you could play it. Maybe you could even like an Inteleon Melody engine with this could be pretty
Yeah.
cool as well. I mean, it doesn't have Starbirth though, so who knows?
You
Yeah, you
get
might be
you get
right.
baby Starbirth. Forest Seal Stone.
I don't know about all that. All right, up next, and I think this one's going to be a game changer. I think it's going to be a lot of cool decks that come out of this one. The Radiant Eternatus, 170 HP. So this is the tankiest Radiant Pokemon I think we've seen so far. So 170 HP. It's got the attack Power Beam for 200 for a Fire, Dark Colors. I actually hadn't even read its attack up to this point. You're probably never using that. But one thing you will be using is the Climax Gate ability. Once on your turn, when you play this card from your hand onto your bench, you may search your deck for up to 2 Pokemon VMAX and put them onto your bench, then shuffle your deck. Your turn ends. So your turn does end, but you're probably using this on turn 1. Chip, what 2 VMAX Pokemon are you going to be getting out of your deck turn 1 with Radiant Eternatus?
There's just so many different options. Yeah, this card is super cool. And one of the things I think that is really neat about this is that at the end of the Sword and Shield block, where we have seen the last few sets be very heavily focused on the V stars, we haven't had that much love to the V maxes. There's been a couple good ones, right? Obviously, Kyurem V Max has proven to be pretty decent, but other than that, it's been all about the V stars. This is going to breathe new life into some potential old cards, which I'm definitely excited about. One of the ones I thought about early on was Shadow Rider, and shout outs to my brother as well, because I told him about this card. I talked about my brother a couple weeks ago on the podcast. He's starting to play the game. He actually bought the Shadow Rider League Battle deck, so when we've been playing, he's been playing his Shadow Rider deck, trying to make improvements on it, make it a little bit better. And when I read him this card, of course, that's the deck he's been playing, he immediately was like, that would be pretty good in my Shadow Rider deck. I was like,
That's one of the ones
You're right. That would be pretty
Yeah.
good in Shadow Rider.
That Shadow Rider is the first one I kind of jumped to. I was like, okay, if you don't even have to make it a Shadow Rider deck, you could just play some Psychic attackers with Shadow Rider at that point, right? You don't need to play 16 basic energy and a 4/4 Shadow Rider. You can just run 3 Shadow Rider VMAX, turn 1, turn just 2 of them into play, and then those become your energy acceleration plus draw engine for whatever else you're playing with it. So I think it gives a ton of cool options. Deoxys VMAX, I think, is another cool
Yeah.
one for some kind of like tanky builds. Espeon VMAX as well to stop effective attacks,
Just another
something
option
like
for
that.
it.
So yeah, I think overall, really, you could do something weird with Eternatus VMAX, but you would have to net the Radiant Eternatus out of play afterwards. But that could still be cool. You could still do something weird there with some dark Pokemon, so that could be interesting as well. But tons of options. I'm super like this one card alone. I keep kind of hating on Silver Tempest, but this one card alone like trumps. I feel like this card trumps Silver Tempest. Like this card in itself is going to add more creativity and value to a format in terms of having a healthy format than all of Silver Tempest did combined.
Yeah, or Orbeetle VMAX is another one that I think you could do some really cool
Yep,
stuff with. That's a card I know you've played plenty of in the past, especially
big fan.
whenever it was a little bit stronger in the meta. So yeah, I think this is really cool. And I mean, honestly, even like getting 2 Kyurem VMAX down, right? Like,
Yeah, that's even pretty cool.
that's not bad at all. And also, like, you can use this 2 turns in a row, right? It is like, and it,
No, no, no. Oh, I guess you could.
yeah,
Yeah,
you go scoop up net and use it again.
yeah. I didn't think
You get 4 VMAXs
it's
in play.
it's even more ridiculous than I thought. The things you could do with this thing are insane. Yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
even think about that. You could. I was like, no, you can't. It's a Radiant Pokemon, but yeah, you just scoop up Netta and you put it back down again. You do it again.
Yeah.
Those decks will probably be a little bit more memey, a little bit less competitive, but I think the first time use, building a deck around that is it seems decent. I mean, I guess maybe you could make it work. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, you put friggin' Deancey in the active spot.
Oh my god, Chip is breaking the meta before our eyes, ladies and gentlemen. For Orbeetle turn 2. That's insane. The Orbeetle is back. Let's get it. I'm even more excited for this card now. Yeah, this card trumps all of Silver Tempest. Actually, one of the reasons probably Silver Tempest, I'm dragging on it again, feels so bad is because we just came from Lost Origin, which
Insane
I
set.
don't
Insane set. Yeah.
insane set for adding just new ways to play the game, creativity, versatility. And even if, and I do agree with this, the meta was not the best competitively, it just made the game so much more enjoyable to play. And then Silver Tempest comes out and it's like, here's Lugia, that's it. And it's like that. I would wish we just, like I said, like give us 3 tier 2 decks and just don't even give us Lugia to begin with. I think I would have been more content with that because I don't think Lugia adds a whole ton as far as just health of the meta goes. I think it only hurts it more so than anything. We're just kind of seeing a repeat cycle of the Mew VMAXs and the Palkia V Stars with now the Lugia VSTAR. So we've seen it before. New broken card comes out, really, really good. Yeah, okay, but yeah. Lost Origin brought so much life to the format. So Silver Tempest feels kind of bad. But Ready Eternatus is not too far away. We're just gotta hold out a couple months.
Not too far away. Yeah, those are the two main cards. There's a couple other cards that got revealed. There's a Hatterini VMAX, a new Sky Sealing Stone card, and also a Simisear V Star. But none of these cards seem like the strongest. The Gigas and Eternatus, though, both very cool. Definitely
Yeah.
both excited to give a shot to those. But yeah, I think that's gonna do it for this week's podcast. Azul, you got any closing thoughts for us?
No, I think that's gonna do it for me as well, Chip. So yeah, send us away.
Yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. As always, if you did enjoy, please be sure to leave us a like on the YouTube video or a rating on your favorite podcasting platform. Seriously, it does go a super long way in helping us out, and it only takes a second. Especially if you're like listening on Spotify, all you just click like two buttons. You go click and then you leave your rating, and that's it. Super easy, and it really does help us out a bunch. If you want to stay connected to us, you can do that over on social media. The best place to do it is on Twitter, at least for the time being. You can follow me at Chip Ritchie. Azul is at Azul_GG. And you can also follow the podcast at Uncommon_Energy. And yeah, thanks a bunch to everyone for the continued support as always. We will be back next week, Tuesday morning, 7 a.m. EST. For me and Azul, thanks so much for listening, guys, and we'll catch you next week.
Peace.